So, we've talked about the differences, the important differences between primary and secondary data, and all the different ways that we can collect this primary data. And if we are doing qualitative data collection, then we are going to be doing lots of work on field notes. So we've talked about field notes, but also interviews are another very, very important form of qualitative primary data. But later on, we're going to be talking about visual methods and about how we collect visual methods. But we've finished talking about collecting this stuff. Now we have to talk about the important task of how we deal with this stuff. So we've written our field notes, we've transcribed our interviews, initially broad, open-ended interviews that become more and more specific and narrow, probably with a smaller bunch of people. We've done all that, we've transcribed everything, wonderful. We've done our field notes, we've got different types of field notes, we've done all that. Now what do? So let's go to full screen now. So just as we talked a bit about the different ways that a research process can proceed, there are different ways that you can deal or process with quantitative and qualitative data. Now, I am not a specialist on quantitative methods, as you know. I'm a qualitative research practitioner. So these steps in white include processing specifically quantitative data, which I have not got as much expertise around. But let's just walk through this. Regardless of whether we are doing a quantitative study or a qualitative study, there are things that we have to do in order for us to collect our own qualitative and or qualitative primary data, which is raw data, which is just speech, observations that hasn't been analysed. It's just been collected. It's gone into our eyes and our ears, onto our notebooks, our voice recorder, our video camera, our still camera. It's gone onto our computer. We've filed them. So there are a number of ways that we collect data: interviews, questionnaires, observations, in-depth group interviews, secondary sources, and all of these must be edited, they must be worked through, they must be massaged, they must be filed in a logical way, making sure that we have a when, what and a where in the file name, the date, the full date, the where we were at the time and what was going on. We have to edit all of this data. The stuff that is not relevant, then consider keeping it and just putting a tag, this is not so good, or consider cutting it. But then most importantly, after you have collected your data, primary and secondary, and organised it, you have to begin to code. Now, if you are doing a quantitative study, then often you have to prepare a code book. So as you are collecting, you are thinking about what you are seeing, and you are organising categories or codes. This is specifically for quantitative studies, not qualitative studies. After you have coded things, then you have to analyze things. So there are different approaches to quantitative and qualitative studies. When you are coding qualitative studies, It's more like you are developing themes. What are the things that you are seeing people do? What are people saying? These are themes. They may help you develop questions to be asking your informants when you are doing participant observation or more interviews. But they are themes. Now, that is different from a quantitative approach where you are using your code book with programs such as SPSS to find themes, isolate the variance. So there are some very increasingly powerful quantitative research programs such as SPSS, which will crunch and analyse those numbers. Those of us who do qualitative data can either analyse the content manually, and I'll be talking about how to do that later on, or we can use computers to do a content analysis, isolate all the occurrence of specific terms and phrases. And of course, you aren't able to do any of this analysis and any of this coding unless you have first collected stuff, and most importantly, that you have organised your primary data and created electronic versions of all the things that you have prepared. Okay, so enough about that. Again, in this series of lectures, we're just going to cut now, and I'm going to be making some final comments, posing some questions, putting you in the direction to be reading, and reminding you about the important points that we have revisited, that we have reiterated, that we have reinforced. Repetition is sometimes a good thing. So I hope that you are beginning to see all the pieces of the research puzzle, the ethnographic research methodology puzzle. So enough for now, next time.